Okay, it's another Autocad tutorial where we're going to look at creating a measured drawing from scratch. We're going to create a simple little hand mirror, and we're going to look at a range of tools including the offset command, creating new layers, and using some 3D functionality, repeating commands we've done before like extrude, but also using the subtract and union commands. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a series of layers. So I'm going to go to the new layer button up here, which is layer properties, click on the new layer button there, and I'm going to create a layer, and I'm going to call it setup, and I'm going to change the color of that one to something fairly bright, and we'll make that red, so that I can do any working out drawing on the setup layer, because I can then turn that off afterwards. So that makes it very quick. Tick makes the layer current. New layer again. I'm going to call this layer plastic because this is the layer that I'm going to produce the actual hand mirror body, which will be made out of plastic. Another new layer here. I'll call this layer glass. So you'll see what I'm doing is I'm changing the layer by the material that I'm going to be using. So I've now got my plastic and glass for the hand mirror. So the glass represents the mirror part of that, and I've got my setup layer in red, and the setup layer is currently on because it's got the tick by it. So I'm just going to shut the layer properties manager down, and I can now start drawing. Before I draw, I'm going to right click on my polar tracking because I want to make sure that I've got something useful like 45 degrees on. This means that when I draw a line, it will snap at 45 degree increments between 90 degrees, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, and so on. I also need to check on my object snap. I'm going to right click on this to make sure that everything I want is on. So I've got endpoint on, midpoint on, center on, intersection on, nearest point on. They are all very useful commands. If you haven't got those on before you start drawing, it will make it quite difficult later on, because these will allow you to snap to these points on objects that you've drawn. So we need to make sure they are all on. So that's all on. Now ready to draw. I'm going to start by just drawing a line for the center of my hand mirror. I'm going to make this line 200 millimeters tall. So I'm just going to draw my line, type in the value of 200. It's now there. And because I've got it moving straight when I did it, with my polar tracking on down there, it should be a straight line. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the middle of this line. There it is there. Just pull out a second line here. The reason I'm doing this is I want to set up a circle, and I need 2 points to set the circle up from. You'll notice here that the circle is set to draw from center to radius, so if I click at the moment, it'll draw from the middle going out, which is no use to me because it'll make my circle too big. So what I actually want to do is click on the arrow here and go to center, or 2 point here, the third option down. So I'm going to draw from there to there and create a circle. That gives me my circle. That circle is now 100 millimeter diameter because it's obviously half of my line. This command here is the offset command, and what this allows me to do is offset a line from a line I've already got by an amount. It's much easier to show it than to describe it. So I'm going to click on offset. It's a multi-part command, so it will say here what distance do you want to offset through, and I'm going to type in the value of 15 and then press return. It'll then say what object you want to offset. Well, I want this object here, and then it will want to know what side. Well, you can see what's going to happen now. If I sort of say I want to offset this line here, but move it this way, it offsets the line by 15 millimeters. And I can then say offset that one and offset it by 15 millimeters that way. So I've now got two lines, 15 millimeters from the middle line, so the distance between here and here is 30 millimeters. I can actually just keep offsetting. It's a really useful tool for offsetting objects quickly. I'm just going to erase those. So, I've got my two bits there. I'm now going to go back to my circle tool from drawing the 2 points. One to there and one to there to give me my round base. And I want a hole in the middle so that I could hang my hand mirror up. So I'm going to go back to my circle tool and do a center out. And I'm just going to click from the center here, bring it out, and where it says diameter value down below there, it says 15, I'm just going to change that to 5, and that gives me my hole in the middle. I also want to show where the mirror would go here, so I'm going to use my offset command again, but this time around I'm going to change the value to 10. I'm going to select this object here because I can offset a circle, bring it in like this, and I've now got the middle offset there. This sets up all the construction lines I need for my hand mirror. I'm going to click on the layer change dialog box here and just quickly change to plastic. That's now the current layer. And we're now going to create a polyline so that I can have my three-dimensional shape. As you remember from previous tutorials, polylines allow me to put a group of different types of line together to create a more complex shape. Clicking on the polyline command, I'm going to start here. The polyline command gives me multiple options, so it assumes I'm drawing a line to begin with, which I am. I'm going to bring my line up to the intersection where it meets the circle. I'm now going to move to the arc option here, because I need to draw an arc. Now, to describe an arc, I have to describe 3 points. So I need the beginning point, which I've got, the end point, which is going to be over here, but I also need a middle point, or a second point on it. So I'm going to click the second point option, bring it up to around here somewhere, and then if I zoom in I can find the last point on the intersection there. Now you'll notice it thinks I still want to do an arc, so I need to change this back to the line command. I'm going to zoom out and pan and bring it to the end point there. Now I need to finish this by doing another arc. I need to describe the second point on the arc, and then I need to bring it round to the end. The final thing I'm going to do is close the shape. I've now got my polyline shape there. If I move over to it, I should be able to select the whole thing. It should all highlight. So I'm just going to go to my 3D tools. I'm going to do extrude, and I'm going to select my polyline. I don't want to select anything other than the polyline. There's nothing else to extrude, so I'm going to press return. Where it asks the amount, we're going to extrude that 15mm. So that will now make it 15mm tall. If I go into my isometric view, I'll be able to see that. We could start by chopping out the hole here, because I can very quickly do that by going into 3D tools again, clicking on extrude, selecting my circle. I don't want to extrude anything else, so press return, and I can bring it up to a height like that. The height's irrelevant because I'm going to use this and cut it away from this shape here, so that it produces a hole. The way I do that is in my 3D tools. You'll find there's a subtract command here. Now subtract is another multi-part command. So if I click on subtract, the first thing it will say is, what do you want to subtract from? Well, I want to subtract from this. Now it'll keep still asking whether I want to subtract from anything else until I say no, and I say no by pressing enter. So I want to subtract from that, and then it will move to what do you want to subtract from it? Well, I want to subtract this from it. Again, there's nothing else I want to subtract, so I'm just going to press return. And it now removes one from the other. You'll see this more clearly by changing your view to conceptual, and you can now see I've got a hole there. I'm going to move back to 2D wireframe because it makes it much easier to draw. I've got my circle here in my setup layer. I want to keep that because I might need it again. But what I also want to do is draw a circle here, extrude it, and then subtract it from this shape to create a hollow that my glass would go in. Again, it's easier to show you this than to describe it. So, going back to my home view, I'm going to create another circle. And you'll see it pulls up the center of that circle there. And if I bring it out to the nearest point here, and snap, I've now got my circle to the exact size as the one below. In my 3D tools, I can now extrude this circle. I'm going to extrude it 10mm, so it's now not quite as tall as my mirror. If I go to a left-hand view, you can see that it's at the bottom of the mirror, and I need it in the top part here. This is 10mm tall, this is 15mm tall, so the distance between the two is 5. So I basically need to move this circle 5mm in the air. And there's a number of ways I can do this, but to show it most easily I'm going to move back to my isometric view. Now if you move back to your isometric view and you find the grid is off like it is here, you'll notice the X, Y and Z axis are actually the wrong way round. If this grid is off, it is often bad news, because it means if you start drawing things, they're not going to draw the way you expect them to, or in this case, if you start moving things, it's not going to move in the way you expect it to. So the first thing I need to do is change this grid back to the way I'd expect it to be, and the way to do that is a very simple command. It's called UCS. It stands for User Coordinate System, but if you just type UCS and press return, it'll give you a load of options. The only one you're interested in is world. If you click world, you'll now notice my grid goes back to normal, my x-axis is going the right way, my y-axis is going the right way, my z-axis is now going up and down. This means when I move this object here, it'll make sense. To move an object, go back to the home command, click on move. Select your object, it's another multi-part command again. It'll still think you want to keep selecting objects to move until you tell it otherwise. You tell it otherwise by pressing enter. So I've selected this, don't want to move anything else, press enter. To move an object in AutoCAD, it needs to know where it's starting and where it's going to end. 9 times out of 10 you want to start it about the object itself. The way to do this is to specify the coordinates. And you do this by simply typing in a value for x to begin with, then y, then z, and you put commas between them to show the difference. Now if you want to move an object about itself, the base point is always 0 in the x, comma, 0 in the y, comma, 0 in the z, and then press enter. It'll then say, OK, what do you want the second point to be? Well, the second point actually wants to be 5 millimeters higher. So we don't want to move it in the x-axis, so it's 0 in x, comma. We don't want to move it in the y-axis, so it's 0 in y, comma. But we do want to move it 5 millimeters in the z-axis. 5. Press return, it now moves 5 millimeters up. And if you go back to your view and look at the conceptual view, you can probably just see it there, forming a line. We want to now subtract this shape from this shape. It's often much easier to select it if you're in the wireframe mode. Back into my 3D tools, subtract. Again, it's a multi-command, so the object I want to subtract from is this. I don't want to subtract from anything else, so I press return. What I want to subtract from it is this. I don't want to subtract anything else from it, press return. Now it doesn't look like that's gone, but if you go into the view and into conceptual, you will see that's now gone. There's only a couple of other things we're going to do. We're going to go back into the wireframe mode. I'm going to add a glass there. So I'm going to go back to my home view and I'm going to click on here and change to glass. The trick's dead simple. I'm now going to draw another circle based on the circle I had before. So I know that's right. This time round I'm going to extrude the glass 5 millimeters, so it's only a 5 millimeter piece of glass, and obviously it's at the base. If I go into my left hand view, we can see that. There it is there. And obviously I need to move that 5 millimeters up in the air so it clears the base and sits just here. Now we moved the last one by doing a 0, 0, 0, but there is another way of moving, and if you're in the view you want to move in, you can actually do something very simple, which is click move, select your object, start your base point just by clicking, make sure you're moving in the direction you want to go. I want to go up, and then just type 5 and it moves it 5 millimeters up. You've got to be careful using this method because it's not quite as accurate. Sometimes if you're not careful with the mouse you can move it the wrong direction. But if we go back to my 3D view again, you'll see that that mirror, that glass, is now in the right area. Notice also my coordinates have changed again, so I'm going to go to UCS because the grid's the wrong way, change it to world to make sure the grid's the right way. If I go into my conceptual view, you can now see the glass is in the right place. There's only one other thing we're going to do here, and the first thing I'm going to do is change setup so it's no longer visible, so I don't see it. So I'm not really going to use that line. I am now going to go back into my conceptual view, and what I'm going to do is fillet or round off all the edges, and that's called filleting. And you'll find in 3D tools there's a fillet edge command. If you click on the fillet edge command, you've got two options: chamfer, which does exactly that, it gives you a diagonal edge to it, or fillet, which gives you a rounded edge. When you open up the fillet command here, you'll see that you've got the option to have chain, loop or radius. Radius is the most useful because we can specify how round we want it. So I'm going to click on radius. It sets itself up as a standard starting dimension of 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter is going to give us a very small curve, so I'm going to change this to 5 millimeters. Once that's done, it wants to know what you want to select, and you can literally go round and just select the edges. So I'm going to select this line here and the line in the middle there. And that's all I want to do for the top. I might select this one here just to round out that edge as well. There we go. If I now press return once, it'll give me a preview. If I press return again, it will then round it off. So you can see I've now got a much nicer rounded edge. I can even fillet the underneath. So if I go for my orbit command here, there we go there, I can go back to my fillet tool and I'm going to round the edge more here. So if we go to fillet edge, this time round I'm going to make the radius 10. So I get a much softer edge. So I'm going to click the object here, click that object there, click the line that would be here, click the line that would be there. Press return, and I've now got my rounded off edge of my mirror. If I go back to my view, I can now orbit around there, and there is my hand mirror done. So to recap, we've learned to use the offset command to set lines apart by a given amount. We've learned to quickly swap between layers and set up layers. We've also learned in the 3D tools the subtract command, so we subtract one shape from another, and the fillet edge tool as well. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we've learned to use the move tool, so we can move an object by either putting in a start value of 0, 0, 0, and then using the move value of 0, 0, whatever distance you want to move it up or down. If you put a minus value in, you'll move an object down. So we were moving things to go up 5, but if I put in a value of minus 5 in the z-axis, it would have moved it minus 5 going down. We've also learned to swap between the views and to make sure that when we swap back, we can use the UCS command to change it to a world view, to put the X, Y and Z axis back the way we want, because if we don't do that, when we move things, it could move in surprising ways that don't make a lot of sense.